issues with the last interview, which was we can't go live on this interview because of some the Zoom links and some issue with that. So we're trying to record it and then go live afterwards. So thanks everyone who is listening and who joined us for the webinar. My name is Osman Ahmed. I am the Director of Community Partnership at Great Minnesota Schools. We're a nonprofit organization based in Minneapolis, and we support schools, partner with communities to advocate for great schools in Minneapolis. And also we create discussions like this today about education equity in Minneapolis, and we try to engage community members, connect them with the decision makers. And today we have one of the candidates running for Minneapolis School Board District 4, Christa Mims, and also we have Harry from the North News with us on the call. So I'm just gonna give the mic to Christa to introduce herself. And actually, how about we go with Harry first, and then we can just have the candidate introduce herself.
Thank you for having me, Harry Colbert Jr. I'm the editor-in-chief of North News, which serves all of North Minneapolis, and District 4 falls into that with just a part of it through the Bryn Mawr area. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Harry. And Christa, yes, you can introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be on here with you, Harry, and with Osman. My name is Christa Mims, and I'm running for Minneapolis School Board in District 4. I currently work for Hennepin County, and I am a social worker, and I also lead work to reduce racial disparities in education. I spent a long time focused on some of the youth that are in our more deep end systems like foster care, juvenile probation, teen parents, kids who have truancy cases. Many of those young people are children of color and have some of the worst educational outcomes of any group. So that's some of the work that I do in my day job. And I'm here running for Minneapolis School Board because I would like to make a difference in our Minneapolis public schools and really fight for those who are not currently being represented in our leadership or at the table for decision making. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for joining us. And you mentioned what is the making a difference. What is the difference that you see now is missing and that you are advocating for or making your priority as you campaign for the 2020 elections?
Yeah, I think that one thing we really need to have in our Minneapolis public schools and through our school board is a really transparent communication channel and an avenue for our communities to be actively part of our decision-making process. I think, it's our duty as a school board to really listen to our communities and not just listen to say that we're listening, but listen and actually treat our young people and our families and our communities as experts in their own experience. I think often we take an approach to solving problems that doesn't include the voices of those who are most impacted. So I think that's one thing that I really want to prioritize is non-traditional methods of communication, really going through our trusted community leaders, using communication channels that our communities are already using, and really trying to engage them in more shared decision-making and transparent and accountable communication. That's something I'd really like to bring to the school board.
Awesome, thank you. Also, we have Amanda from the Citizens League who would have been, want to be part of this conversation. And so we had some technical issues with joining us before. But Amanda, if you can just quickly introduce yourself, and then you just missed one question, so you're still good.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be on here. Thank you, Osman. Really appreciate you. Like Osman said, Amanda Kunchbahari. I'm the Public Policy Director with the Citizens League. Really happy to be on here with Harry, with Christa, and excited for the conversation. So my apologies for the technical issues, but happy to be joining you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And Harry and Amanda, if you feel like I'm not the only one asking for questions, so you all feel like if you want to ask questions for Christa, and she's on the hot seat, so just please feel free to ask. And I just want to, the other question I would ask is, there is a lot of there are a lot of people who are voting on the elections of 2020, and we have 13 days. And Christa, one of the reasons why we are pushing for forums like this last minute is we want to really raise awareness about education and the importance of the school board. And what would you tell people to, how do you ask people to get involved for the next 13 days and beyond, and why?
Thank you. That is a great question. I feel like there has been a lot of energy around kind of looking at more down ballot races and local elections, and this acknowledgement of the immense power that some of these local elections really have for our communities. School board, oh my goodness, I will beg all of you to be involved in that process. I think that electing our school board is such an important thing for our kids and for our future and our communities. And, you know, I'm happy to provide any more information about myself or talk more about school board races. I'm just really excited to have more people involved. And I think that we owe it to our kids to really pay attention to those decisions that we're making. Because depending on the leadership we have in the school board, we could see more disparities be, you know, exacerbated. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, this type of leadership is so important for our kids right now. And we need people who are willing to listen and willing to make change and willing to provide those opportunities for solutions for our community right now. So I would just say, please get involved with all levels of the election, and please, please, please vote.
Both you and the person who is also seeking this seat have on a part of your platform equity baked into it. But I'd like to ask you to drill down and tell us a little bit more about how you see achieving equity. In particular, I'm going to talk about it during a pandemic when I'm actually teaching at North High through North News, and we're seeing the inequity of access to adequate internet hotspots, learning environments outside of the schoolroom. So how do you see addressing equity in that fashion?
Thank you. I think, you know, this pandemic has done nothing but exacerbate the disparities and barriers to access that we already were experiencing in our communities. And that is something that I actively am working on trying to alleviate within my day job. So it's something that is really very important to me. I think in issues of equity, we come back to that community involvement and communication. I think we're often, you know, sending out surveys or engaging with families in a way that's not always accessible to them or doesn't always feel safe for them to engage in. So there's not always a true awareness of what's actually needed at the school. I think many of our families of color have not felt like they're a welcome part of our school communities. And I think that's for a variety of reasons, but until we're actually willing to engage with them and actually address the issues that they're experiencing and acknowledge the issues they're experiencing, we're going to continue to have these blinders as to what our least resourced, most vulnerable young people and families are experiencing in our system. We think about people who are unstably housed right now and how many additional barriers they have to connectivity or distance learning. Our young people who need special education services or English language learner households who are not getting the communication that they need or the supports that they need to be successful. I think we need to be using an equity lens when we're making decisions and think about who has the most and who does not, and how we can really allocate resources in a way that's going to bring all of our students up, especially those who are not being served well by our current systems. So I think those pieces are really important to me. I, of course, really want to invest in teachers and professionals of color. We know how meaningful that can be for our young people to see those examples and role models. It's been shown that all children do better when they have teachers and professionals of color around them. I'm also very much a logical realist, and I know that these problems will not be solved overnight. That is something that we have to have a strong commitment and a long-term commitment to really addressing the issues we have. We need to be committed to culturally responsive education and curriculum. We need to be committed to investing in our young people and developing a pipeline for teachers of color. We need to be investing in the workers that we have now that are really dedicated to our young people and trying their best to really serve their needs. So I I try to have a balance of realism and, you know, that vision for long-term success. We've got to keep working and keep moving to really support our families.
Thank you,
Hopefully that
Christa.
answered. Thanks.
I want to ask a follow-up.
Yeah.
For folks who are not familiar with your past work experiences and just kind of professional background, can you talk a little bit about how you have promoted racial equity in the past work that you've done and how you've centered that in the current work that you're doing and how you'll bring that to your candidacy as well on the school board?
Absolutely. Thank you, Amanda. I think, you know, I talk a lot about my work at Hennepin County. That has been a battle with a big bureaucratic system, right? And getting big bureaucratic systems to move also takes a lot of time, a lot of passion, a lot of data, a lot of real life stories. And in my positions at Hennepin County, I've served as a social worker in our child protection area, serving Indigenous youth and families, a kinship social worker. I've been leading work for our education domain, which really is focused on those populations I mentioned before, the kids in our systems. Most recently, I've also taken on a new area in our county called Education Support Services that is, again, really focused on our young people who are in our systems who have multiple barriers to access to devices, to things that you know, many of our families kind of take for granted at this moment or are thankful to have at this moment. Throughout all of that, it's really important to take a look at not only the data that we see around disparities. You know, we all have access to the Minnesota Department of Education's dashboard around, you know, educational attainment and those different benchmarks for our young people. We can see the data. We know that our kids of color are much below. There's a huge gap for achievement. But I think that the data only takes us so far in that story. Again, we have to be willing to talk to our communities and actually understand the impact of what's going on for those young people, for those families. So, you know, an example of that with this new education support services area, I really advocated for asking young people, what is it that you want from a caring adult? What is it that would really support you and make you feel like you could be more successful? You know, we really took that feedback and made sure that that vision that these young people were giving to us was also part and really the main part of the services we're trying to provide for our youth. I also am a big fan of using, as I've mentioned before, sort of that equity lens. We use a racial equity impact tool to really look at and dissect how the decisions that we make are benefiting or burdening certain people. And part of that process is always having this meaningful engagement where people have an opportunity to weigh in on the decisions that we're making and have as much shared power in those decisions as possible. So that's some of the work that I've been doing in the county.
I think that's something, you just alluded to something I want to say about how families feel, especially families of color. You know, we hear, according to that Start Tribune and many other articles like I've read for the last couple of years, you hear that, you know, a lot of families that live in the district, especially families of color. And the data is not really mentioning what that means, but what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of families who are, just what you say, you know, they feel like their voices have not been heard, and they, you know, the district is too big for them to listen or whatnot. What would you tell them, those families?
Yeah, I would say I hear you and I see your experience, and I want to validate the fact that you haven't felt part of the school community or that your child's needs have not been prioritized. And I want to say we have to do better. Minneapolis Public Schools has to do better. This is so urgent for the future of our city, the future of our communities, the future of our young people. They deserve the world. They deserve the best possible opportunity at an excellent, rigorous education. And my passion is that I will listen to you and I will let you be part of this decision-making process. I will honor your experience because we have to do better. We have to make a difference now. It's so important.
When we're talking about this achievement gap and looking at it from an equity lens, it's one thing to graduate a student, but it's another thing to graduate them with the proper tools. From a school board level, what are some policies that can be implemented that will make sure that a student graduates and they graduate with the proper tools to move on, and you're not just matriculating someone just to say that they've graduated.
Absolutely. I think there's, a variety of ways that we can really recognize individual students' talents and gifts. And I think that in some ways, our traditional academic experience doesn't always acknowledge those things. I think that there are a lot of ways that we can incorporate those skills into what we currently have in our educational process and really use more of this kind of culturally responsive curriculum to be able to demonstrate how the skills that our young people have can be translated into careers, into industries, into post-secondary education. I think we have a really big opportunity to rethink how we evaluate, how we teach, and how we really determine someone's readiness. All that said, I don't think that we're solving any problems by having a young person graduate who doesn't have the skills required for a career path, or for post-secondary education, or simply getting a job that requires a high school graduate or a high school diploma. That's doing a disservice to our students. And I think we really have to think about how we can better prepare our young people for the real world, how we can continue to bring those parallels of what they have in their community, where there are strengths and needs in their community, how they can be use the skills that they're learning and actually use that real life application. I have worked with some young people in tutoring, and I know it is, and I think this is just like a general in school, it's sometimes hard to see how some of the skills that you learn in school can translate to your future. And I think we're, again, doing a disservice by not explaining how those skills can benefit them in the long term. If no one takes the time to show them, listen, I have to use this in order to be successful in my career as a planner or as a construction worker. How can we make this into a real life situation where our young people can have goals and ambitions that really can benefit from the skills that we're teaching, some of those real life skills we can teach at school.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Oh,
yep.
Sorry, Asma.
No, I just want to say, if the people have questions who are listening on the webinar, please send them the chat, or just let me know by raising your hand, and there's an answer and question box that you can send your questions, and then I'll be able to see it. So Amanda, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yes, please send in your questions. So kind of going off of that, Christa, I'm curious if you can talk about the way in which you're going to engage kind of higher education institutions, employers, in order to really get a sense of what they're looking for, for folks to be, you talk about young people being prepared so that they're able to then find work and are learning about things that are actually going to support them in doing that. How are you as a candidate going to be able to foster those relationships and build those coalitions?
Thank you, Amanda. I think there's a lot of opportunities to engage with our higher education community. I think that, from my interactions with, for example, the University of Minnesota, they are really interested in how they can have students be better prepared to join their programs, how they can ensure that they're recruiting young people and young diverse populations here from Minnesota, from our local communities. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities for us to be creative and how we can bring a post-secondary education and make it something where our young people can see themselves at those institutions, where we can really get more information, again, like you were saying, about what they're expecting and how we can better prepare our students while still honoring their skills and thinking about things beyond just our standardized tests, which I know have a lot of implications and have a lot of bias, just to be frank. So thinking about how we can really prepare our students to be successful in post-secondary institutions, and how we can best kind of demonstrate that they can go there, they can be part of this. We need to be thinking about how we can be innovative and really include it, whether or not it's mentors from the university or visits or people coming in, professors coming in and talking to our kids. How can we make this something that's accessible to our young people, and how can we show them what's possible? So I think that that is something that I would really want to explore as a candidate and as a school board member. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the questions that was asked was, how will you directly work with the superintendent to implement ideas you are passionate about?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. The superintendent, as our one employee, I think that's my job, to direct him to do things that we're passionate about. And at the same time, we as a board have to be responsible and come together as a board to make these decisions and set the tone and vision for the school district. I think that something that has to happen is really setting these clear goals, clear measures of accountability, and really setting a clear timeline and vision for how that can be implemented, while also trusting that a superintendent that we've hired and we're managing is going to take what we've given them for direction and really implement that throughout the district. So it's that, ability to really provide the accountability and manage the things that he's doing or they are doing, and then, ensuring that they're implementing that down to the rest of the district.
Thank you. I think we have a follow-up on that one too. So how do you build consensus as a board, and do you have examples of doing that and making decisions or making changes? Sorry.
Absolutely. I think building consensus on the board, something that you have to be comfortable with is having disagreements. I think we all come into the board, or we all come into these different situations. We've got different experience and different ideas about how we can come to a solution. So I think part of it is being able to listen to others and not always agree. I know that doesn't necessarily mean how are you coming to a consensus, but we can't constantly be fighting each other in a way that's not bringing about respectful dialogue and not getting us to a solution. I think we can also think about what are the underlying reasons that we disagree, and how can we come together? Do we agree on the vision but not agree on the steps? How can we build this in a way that is bringing together the different voices, opinions, and the feelings of our constituents into the decisions that we make? I can say at Hennepin County, I've had to build consensus around a lot of kind of radical ideas that really have required investing in relationships, investing in, presenting facts and data that, again, I always like to provide. We've got this quantitative data and we've got qualitative data, and we need to value both in the decisions that we're making. So really, bringing together a sound argument, really listening to others to find out what their concerns are, if this is something that, they're not agreeing about, and then coming together to understand what's our mission? What's our vision? Why are we here? Does this decision serve our kids and our families and our schools, or does it not? And really prioritizing those pieces. I think we all have to come back to the table and say, this is our mission and this is how we need to move forward. But again, it requires a lot of conversation, a lot of dialogue, and really presenting the evidence and the facts. And again, that quantitative and qualitative evidence to show this is going to be a good decision for our schools.
Thank you. Another question that's asked by the people listening to is there another public school district in the country that you think could be a model for, or a positive example for MPS? So is there another model in the country or district you should be looking up to? Or
Yeah, thank you. I think that I don't know if there's any perfect school district, but I think that there are a lot of districts that have really great programs or really great initiatives, really great ways of working with students that we should absolutely be borrowing from. There's no reason to not use evidence-based best practice if it's effective with a similar type of population that we have here in Minneapolis. I lived in Seattle, Washington for a while and had a lot of interaction with the school districts there. I think that there are some really great things that happen within those school districts where they have really empowered their young people and brought in different kind of enrichment activities that have really benefited the youth that I used to work with. But at the same time, I'm not going to say they don't have issues and they don't have disparities, because they do. So I think it really is taking what is good from different districts and different areas around the nation, maybe, internationally, and thinking about what's going to be a best fit for our communities. And again, using that opportunity to engage meaningfully with our parents, our families, our teachers, our staff, and really find out, you know, is this something that would be a good fit for our district?
Thanks, Christa.
Mm-hmm.
If I could ask a follow-up on that, I'm curious as to what your actual strategies will be for engaging parents, engaging young people who are actually going through those school systems, and empowering them and really taking their feedback and using it.
Yeah, I think that the strategy has to be moving beyond our traditional methods of listening, our traditional methods of engagement. So I think that we have to go to places where our community is located. It's a little bit different and a little bit harder now that we can't physically be in space together as much. So that's where I think we have to pivot and go to community leaders, trusted messengers within our community, and figure out how we can best get information to and from and shared to be able to reach our communities. So that could be looking at, you know, faith leaders, community centers, different community organizations that have these positive relationships within our community, thinking about where and how young people are engaging and where they're not, and how we can best make sure that their voices are coming through and coming to our decision making. It's, you know, if you had talked to me before March, which is when I decided to run, you know, I wasn't thinking about the implications of this pandemic. It hadn't materialized yet. And now I think we're seeing we have to be willing to try new things. Otherwise, our kids are going to suffer. So I think really engaging with those community leaders, community members, and then as they give us feedback about what's working and what's not, we have to change. We have to be willing to change. So long as we're able to meet the needs and really provide accountable and transparent communication, we should be willing to do that in ways that we're not used to. And I think that's the point. We have to serve families the best way that they need, not the best way that we need.
I guess it's kind of along the lines of what you were just speaking, but I wanted to pose this question, how you will address it. In North particular, North High School and Patrick Henry High School, within the past 3 weeks, we've seen 3 tragedies where students were lost to violent means. And so you have the students who are dealing with that trauma and at the same time trying to gain an education, along with working with community leaders. How as a school board member, will you work to address and alleviate this trauma, along with whether it be local government, law enforcement, et cetera?
Absolutely. Yes. There's been so much trauma, especially in that community and for many of the young people that I work with. And I think that we have to continue to and reinvest in supportive services for our young people. And I think, again, this is another place where we have an opportunity to invest in non-traditional methods of supporting our young people. Maybe it is, you know, social workers and mental health professionals that are part of that school community, but maybe there are also community leaders, community organizations that can also provide more of that community healing than what we might have in some of our more rigid systems. Many of our young people, even without these tragedies, are coming to school and coming to the classroom having experienced a lot of trauma. And I know that is an active barrier to a young person being successful at school. So the more that we as educators, as school board, can really think about how to support those young people and give them space to heal and breathe and come to school in the best way that they can, I think that we have to think about what community needs from that and what young people are saying that they need as far as supports go.
Thank you. Unless the people on the listening, unless you have questions, we have almost end of our conversation with Christa. We really appreciate your time and coming. You know, like I cannot even imagine, you know, like campaigning in 2020 with everything that's happening. You know, all I have to say is that best of luck for the next 13 days, and thank you for thank you for stepping up in this unusual, year. And just my only other question is like, how, I think you talked about this a lot, but like for the next, what is your like first 100 days after you got elected? What you say you got elected, and it's not guaranteed, but what is your plan for first 100 days? If you can maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to engage with all of you. That first 100 days, I think, is just a continuation of the work, right, in a different capacity. And my goal would be to communicate with and reach out to as many as possible, the members in my school community, not just District 4, but in our greater Minneapolis community as well. There are so many things going on for families right now, and school should be a really positive and helpful place for them. And we need to look at how we can best support them going from January until the rest of the school year. We know we've got a really big transition year coming because the CDD was passed by the Minneapolis School Board. There's a lot of fear and anxiety. There's a lot of questions about what that's going to look like. And we really need to dig in and talk to our communities about how we can best implement that plan, how we can continue to support their young people in the system, how we can continue to support teachers and staff and the other people who are working to make our school district and our schools a successful place for our young people. So that first 100 days, I would want to be, of course, building relationships with my fellow directors because that's important to effective decision making. But I also desperately want to engage with as many families as possible so that I can better understand what their needs are. And I've been doing a lot of that right now with campaigning, but I take it very seriously. And I really believe that that is the key to us making positive and good decisions and making change in our school district. So that would be a really key priority in that first 100 days.
Thanks, Christa. We do actually have one more question in the chat that I want to make sure we cover. What do you think is the biggest barrier to redistribution of resources that a district has in order to meet the needs of students and families who may not have that much access?
Yeah, I think, I kind of read that question in a couple of ways. So maybe, Jeanette, if I'm not answering it in the vein that you meant, please comment. But I immediately thought about, barriers of distribution as far as that connectivity, distance learning resources and the in-person supports that many of our young people need. I constantly see a barrier to communication as one of those issues for distributing resources and understanding the true need of our students and our families. The people that I have worked with at Hennepin County don't always have access to an email, to a phone, to things like budgets and money. Okay, I will jump back then. So that is, one area I think has been really, really difficult was, like I said, those physical resources that our kids need right now in order to engage in school. For budgets and money, I think that it is, again, so important to make sure that we are understanding what is unique and special and needed at each one of our schools, and really understand the populations and communities that live there and engage in those schools. For allocating resources, we need to think about where there are extra resources needed and use things like a racial equity impact tool to understand where there are benefits and burdens to spending our money in certain ways. We have to understand that all of our children deserve an excellent education and that they should have the resources available to them to have that excellent education. So we have to start there. But I will agree, the budgets and the money, it's a tough spot because there are a lot of families and a lot of young people that have special interests and really want their educational experience to be the best. I'm here to make sure that all of our kids get access to that excellent education and really make funding decisions that align with that value. So hopefully that answered that question for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also for the people who listen to this, we have a lot of answers from most candidates, especially running for a large District 4 and District 2 in Minneapolis School Board for this year. We have our website at greatmnschools.org, and we have a lot of organizations and a lot of community members sharing those. We're grateful for our partners to distribute that e-photo guide for people to know about the candidates, to learn about the issues and that, where you stand on different priorities. So you can check out that, and we really appreciate your time, Christa, and thank you so much for joining us today. For everyone else, we're gonna take a break, and we have a 5 p.m. And Rihanna, who is running for the same seat for District 4, will join us. So unless you have a question, thank you so much, and we will let you go back to the campaign.
Thank you, Christa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.